So let's get into it. What would be the plan for today? First up, I will share a little word on UXtweak for those who do not know about us yet. And then our guest Lena will talk about designing your job search strategy, and we will end up with a live Q&A with Lena. So please make sure to provide your questions into the chat, and then we will answer them together in the end. So, what is UXtweak? First of all, UXtweak is a UX research platform which allows you to test all the aspects of your product from the very beginning with organizing your content through card sorting, tree testing. You can get to know your participants or users better with empathize with the users tools, which include preference test, 5-second test, survey. You can test all the aspects of usability of your product with our mobile testing, prototype testing, website testing, and first click test. And also, if you want to, you can also set up an interview with your users, either a study interview with a specific research approach or just a free-form interview if you want to chat with your users. Our newest addition to our live interviews is our highlight reels, which enable you to create a full-fledged highlight reel directly in the platform without the need of using any external video editing software. Other than a research platform, UXtweak also helps you with participant recruiting. We always guarantee the quality of the responses. You can recruit for any study type in UXtweak. Our panels cover basically the whole world, and we take pride in providing fair incentives to all our participants. That would be enough about UXtweak, and now let me introduce our guest for today, Lena. Hi, Lena.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
It's great having you today. I'm really looking forward to hearing more about the job search strategy because in the unfortunate days or times of many layoffs, this is a incredible topic for anyone who joins us today. So, based on your history as a recruiter, then a recruiter lead, and finally UX researcher in Miro, which is a great company, I'm sure that you will have many stories to share from your stay there. Is there any highlight, or would you like to keep that for your presentation without any
Let's
spoilers?
let's keep the spoilers for the presentation.
Great. And other than that, you have also a course on Maven about mastering your product design and UX research job. Will we hear more on that as well, or would you want to tell us more about that right now?
100%. I can share a little bit, but I think hopefully the insights from the presentation will speak as well for the course. But with mentoring and advising, that's how I call it, hundreds and hundreds of job seekers, I basically realized that I cannot scale myself and my personal time too much. So I've created the course, and it's really like zero to sign. Kind of course, how to really start strategizing, how to build your application materials, how to network, how to build connections, how to interview, how to go through the tasks, how to present your portfolio, and also a very, very important topic that I also speak a lot about is to how to really handle your mental health, your confidence levels throughout the interview processes. Because of course, as you said, it's a very unfortunate time of the layoffs, and lots of folks take it very personally, unfortunately. So the course is there to really enable everyone to be the strongest candidate that they can be. And lots of folks who have gone through the course already coming back and saying many more interviews coming in. Some of them already signed the offers, which is extremely, extremely exciting. And so happy to share a little bit more about that in one-on-one. Anyone can reach out to me and I'm happy to tell more.
Lovely. I'm already sold, so I will give the floor to you right now, and let's get into the presentation. Thank you again for joining us today, Lena.
Thank you. I'm much better at presenting than at selling, so let's get into that. And I'm super happy for everyone to join. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day. And today we're going to be speaking about a very important topic of designing your job search strategy. Very quickly to introduce myself, has already been mentioned. So I led product design and UXR recruitment and Miro, and also at the company N26. I was a user researcher at Miro as well for a year. So actually, after building the whole team, I joined the team, and I wish I would have known about UXtweak earlier, because I would have loved to test some of the features, as like the website testing specifically. I most recently founded my recruitment and job search advising boutique agency, which basically means that I'm helping companies and candidates come together. And as been mentioned as well, Maven course is a big creation of mine for this year, and happy to share more about that. But what does it mean? It's a lot of titles. Why do you need to trust me? Why do you need to think that all the information that I'm going to be sharing is actually credible and makes sense? What's important to know that I've hired more than 100 product designers and user researchers. It may not sound too much, but when you go to a company that really corresponds to the very potentially the highest levels of design discipline, you need to be extremely picky and very, very targeted. And so that's what I've been doing for the last 6 years. I also interviewed 4,000 candidates plus. It's hard to tell the exact number, but for you to understand, to interview 4,000 people, you need to review thousands and thousands of portfolios and CVs. And that's how I know that I know what good and bad looks like, and what converts and what doesn't convert. I led hiring for senior roles, for staff roles, for design manager roles, for lead designer roles, for directors, senior directors, and also the C-level role at Miro. I advised more than 100 people so far on their job seeking journeys. And as I said, I'm happily seeing that some of my students and some of them as well securing the roles. And so that's a little bit of the credibility part to me. While, however, I was advising to all of those people, I kind of was asking myself that question, like, what do product development, recruitment, and job search have in common? Why was it important for me to understand? Because I've noticed that when I throw all of those job search and recruitment slang at people, not only I don't help them to understand it better, I confuse them more. And so I kind of ask myself, what can I find as commonalities? What can I find as the flow that can bring those three together, so I can explain and make it extremely digestible for all product designers and user researchers out there who need to understand how to navigate the job search market. So what they definitely have in common is plenty of stages. We know that product development life cycles have 5 to 8 whatever stages, depending on the company. All of them have multiple iterations levels, because you always have to see how you're performing and see how you can adjust. And they all have unexpected bugs, like technical difficulties on the Zoom call. Have we ever had that? I'm sure we all have experienced those things. It's terrible on the interviews, but it happens to the best of us. So this is something that I definitely perceive as, one of the challenges that everyone should be ready for. So then, as a researcher, I suppose I went and mapped it out. I was asking myself, okay, so if we want to create some stages for the job search, let's start with the product development lifecycle, because this is a very well-defined and very digestible flow for any product designer and user researcher. So we'll start with the concept idea. Then afterwards, we'll go into research. Of course, we design, we implement our designs, we test our designs, and then we launch, right? And then we see how perform, and sometimes we're going through iterations and going back and forth. In recruitment, we start with the job intake. So that's when all the ambiguous job descriptions are being created, and we're trying to figure out what does the ideal candidate look like. Then afterwards, we post, so we ship. Then afterwards, we also go and start sourcing for the candidates, because as a recruiter, you cannot rely only on the inbound, but you also want to grab some people from the market. As you source and review, you interview folks, then you hire them, and then you onboard them into the organization. But when I kept on thinking about the job search, I couldn't quite really, create a good flow that would still be extremely clear and transparent. Of course, there is an application, and then I kept on interviewing people and asking, like, what do you do? Like, okay, I apply. Some would say, sometimes a network, meaning that I send out a couple of invitations on LinkedIn, and that's the networking effort that they do. Of course, there is a CV and portfolio preparation stage. We all know that. It's a never-ending conversation, how it needs to look like. but that's it. There is nothing else that creates that strategy. There is nothing else that creates the flow. There's nothing else that you can come back and see, okay, those are the steps that I've done, and this is what worked, this is what didn't work. So I said to myself that I'm going to map out the job search strategy and make it as digestible and as clear and as impactful as possible. But the biggest question for me was, how do I explain why it's important? So how do I sell it then as a strategy to the candidates to make sure that they actually enable to succeed? And so there are a couple of things that I found as the answers to myself. First of all, you have to have a job search strategy to gain clarity. Because if you don't know where you're going and how you're going there, you're just walking in the dark and no one succeeds in such an environment. Second of all, you can create a checklist. Okay, so I've done A, B, C. I need to do X, Y, Z. Maybe I'm not able to do B. So what can I do else to actually progress in my application? You need to be able to adjust in your strategy. It comes down to every strategy. It's no matter what you do really in life, you always need to be able to iterate because all processes are quite flexible. Let's put it this way. However, if you don't know what you've done really because you didn't have the strategy and you didn't know what your step-by-step approach, it's very hard to adjust because you have no idea what's not performing. And lastly, if you do know what you're doing, you gain in strategy, you gain in confidence, and you gain in clarity. And if you're a confident candidate, it's much easier to basically create that perception as a better professional and stand out in the crowd because you're showing that you know exactly what's happening. So then I ask myself, can I or can I not translate the product development lifecycle stages into the job search lifecycle stages? And will it or will it not make sense? And so I moved into the product development lifecycle stages as discover, define, design, build, ship, maintain, and sunset. And so in the following couple of minutes, I want to describe you how those stages can be perceived in product development lifecycle and also how it can be perceived in the job search lifecycle. So let's begin with the discovery, it's the first stage. In the product development lifecycle, in the discovery stage, we gather the high-level information and data, basically to understand the potential value of our solution and also what are the costs, how much do we need to pay. In the job search lifecycle, we're basically trying to understand our potential value on the market in terms of our candidacy. So the experiences, the competences, the skills, aspirations, and all of those good things. We also want to understand what are the costs of pursuing those. Like, so do we have the qualities that are required by the market in the current state? So basically the questions that you could be asking yourself in the discovery stage as you just approaching, or even if you're already in, by the way, you can always restart and it's fine. You can ask yourself, what roles are on the market? So pay attention to seniority, problem space, potential awesome, remote, hybrid, on-site, or anything like that. Like, what do you want and what is out there? What kind of companies are hiring? Big, small, B2B, B2C, enterprise, whatsoever. What are the skills employers looking for? Accessibility, product design, prototyping, design systems, whatsoever. Who is hiring for those roles? Who are those people who are pushing out those job specs? Who are the hiring managers? Who are the potential team members who are going to be talking to you on the interviews? Who is getting those roles? Now, I understand this is not necessarily so easy to see, but if you start following the company and if you start following the jobs, you might as well see who is getting that role afterwards. So if you have been able to do that, it's great. You can also go into LinkedIn and actually see in the company, sometimes they do post recent hires and things like that. And then also you potentially want to know what are the current employees saying about those roles and the companies and the setups. Because the reality is what the role is saying in the job description, what it's going to be about and what it's actually going to be about, sometimes are two very different things, because we all know recruitment is to an extent a marketing. So yes, you want to try to contact some of the team members and try to understand, really dig deeper. What is that role? What is that need? What is the first problem that I would need to solve if I were to get that role and actually join your team? So this is the beginning of your discovery stage. Then, of course, we're moving into the definition stage. In the product development lifecycle, we basically describe and agree on hypotheses. We want to align on the approach to the problem and also maybe functionality. We would like to design in higher fidelity to validate it afterwards with our users. So what is it going to be, how is it going to look like, and how we're going to test it. In the job search lifecycle, we basically start to define our strategy. So we went out, we did our research, we benchmarked a little bit, potentially prioritized, and here we go, we're ready to go. So we start analyzing what does it take to get that role? What assets you may want to have? CV, portfolio, anything else? Who may champion you as the candidate? Do you have any connections in those companies? Do you know someone who knows someone who knows someone who can refer you, for example? You want to prioritize fearlessly when you think about the roles, connections, skills, steps, and resources. Because if you don't, that's what leads you to disappointment, burnout, feeling of being neglected, very lowered confidence level, and things like that. You want to start with your top 5 to 10 roles and really put a lot of effort into those roles instead of being just spreading yourself thin and applying for everything that you see, because those applications do not bring results. So the questions that you may ask yourself: what roles do I want? Meet, IC, leadership, product design, UX research, service design, whatever it is. Do I have what it takes to get that role? Do I have those skills? Does the role want me back? So do I match with the role? And of course, you have to be careful here, because we all know that, if male candidates see 3 out of 10 bullet points that they identify with, they would apply. If women, for example, see 9 out of 10, they will not apply. So be critical here. If you hit top 3 out of 6, there is a potential chance, because you need to know that in the job descriptions, not all competencies that are listed are actual primary competencies. There will be some primary and there will be some secondary, so like must have and nice to have. So try to identify what is actually the job description is telling you. What are they saying that definitely have to be, and what is a must have? Think, what kind of company do you want to be a part of and why? I want to be a startup because I want to wear different hats. I want to move fast. I want to go in the big company and have a lot of mentorship and have more progression in terms of, personal development budget and all of those good things that you sometimes don't get at smaller companies. What are your priorities? Flexibility, salary, title, team, growth, whatsoever. Think about those things. What are the major strengths that make you a strong candidate, your superpowers? Now, I know when we speak about superpowers, everyone's like, well, I don't have any superpowers. Well, this is at least how I feel usually. But like, what is it you're really good at? What is it that makes you a standout candidate if 10 product designers come into play? Like, what do you bring that corresponds with those priority number 1 roles that you can bring to the table? What are your weaknesses? Improve them. Without knowing where you need to grow, it's very easy to get into the trap that you being asked a question and you're not able to answer it. And this is very bad for your basically process. So you need to understand what are the weaknesses, areas for growth, however you want to call them. And you really need to think, can I improve them now? Can I improve them in the future? Can this company potentially help them to improve? How? How will I tell that in the interview process? Will you apply or ask to be referred? You have to understand that in many companies now, with this madness of hundreds of applications, some of the roles may not be even posted or maybe posted just for a very short period of time. So if you find your champions, your chances of being interviewed and then hired are much, much higher. So you need to understand in how many of your priority 1 roles there will be champions that will refer you for the role. Are you connected to the relevant folks who will help you in your process? No? Then you have to start connecting and engaging with them. How many and which companies will you go for? Because if you plan in a holiday in 2 months, you cannot apply for 30 roles, because basically if you do progress, you will not be able to go into the interview. And it's a very disappointing and very frustrating process for the company as well. And you may lose your chance just because you weren't available on time. Also, you need to think about your mental health. You need to think about how many interviews can you do. But you also need to think about the conversion. If you have targeted really well and if you have created great application assets, your conversion may be higher. If you haven't done it, your conversion may be low. So you apply for 30 roles and you convert only 1 into the interview. Then, of course, you need to expand the funnel in the top. When is a good time to start your process? Think about that. Am I ready now? Am I ready in 1 month? When can I interview? When can I give that time? So all that is the part of the strategy. Is it the good time of the year to start applying? Is it the good time of the day to start applying, like 25th of December? And then it keeps on piling up for weeks and weeks and weeks when the recruiters are out of office? Or is the 2nd of January the best and the most strategic day? So think about those things. Come up with a way of tracking your application and your networking efforts as you answer those questions and go for it. Tracking is extremely important. If you apply for roles and they come back and you have no idea what the role was because you didn't save anything, you don't know what you sent there, and things like that, you simply lowering your chances for coming up as a very prepared, very engaged, and very relevant candidate. So tracking your application efforts and networking efforts is extremely important. Cool, here we are, we're in the design stage. So we want to produce all necessary visually interactions and user experience design assets to enable hypothesis testing. So we design it and then we'll go test it in a very human word. In our design stage, in the job search lifecycle, we want to design all application assets that will be required because we have seen the roles, we have identified what to go for, and now we want to understand what will be needed. Is it a CV? Is it portfolio? We need to also potentially work on our LinkedIn. Cover letters. I have a very diverse opinion. I have not read even one cover letter in 7 years of recruitment, so I cannot tell you whether it's very useful or not. For more junior profiles, potentially it's useful, but my personal opinion, your portfolio must be your cover letter, and it must be speaking about your aspirations, motivations, and backgrounds. So let's break it down to all CV, portfolio, and LinkedIn. What do you need to do there? In CV, first of all, you have to make sure that it's readable. And by readable, I literally mean, can I see the font? Because someone 30 years ago, potentially, because it seems to me like that, said, you know what, CV needs to be 1 page. And so up until now, everyone is squeezing their experiences into that 1 page. God forbid it's 2 pages. And then recruiters like myself cannot read it simply. If I cannot read it, I cannot progress you into the funnel, and basically you're rejected. So folks, please leave it out. If you need 2 pages, use those 2 pages, but make sure that you really uncover what you've done and it's really accessible in the very basic way that I can mean it. Do your job titles make sense and do they exist? Do not be strategic, regional, product design, research manager. Like, it makes no sense. It's not a job, right? So is it the user research professional manager? Is it the product designer? UX, UI designer, okay, sure, but it's more old school, so just use product designer and it's totally okay. Does it speak about your relevant experiences and impact? It should not be the task. I facilitated workshops. I collaborated with the cross-functional team. I designed prototypes. Okay, fine, this is your job description. What kind of output and impact have you created? Why do I need to hire you instead of any other person who can do the same things? What makes you special in that role? And this is your outcomes and your impacts. And that's how you need to drag it out of your experience. Make it in chronological order. We all have LinkedIns, so use LinkedIn as a template to create your CV. Even better, use a CV builder and they will help you to do that. You need to mention timeline and location of your experiences. It's very frustrating when you cannot understand for how long you've been engaged, where you've been engaged, and things like that. It needs to include your address, marital status. Yes, no? I would say no. I don't care where you live. I mean, in terms of what kind of street you live. Picture. Do we want to bias our employers? Is it a good picture? What is a good picture for a CV? I don't know. This is a very interesting conversation that we will not be having because I would say do not have it. I, as a recruiter, should not be worried about those kind of things. I will ask you on the call whether you're married or not, because if we need to relocate you, potentially then we need to think about the visa for you, your family, your kids, and things like that. Unless that happens, I don't care about any of those personal life elements. And it also needs to look nice. Honestly, I think it's extremely easy to use a CV builder, and it's also extremely important, especially for product designers, to somehow try and reflect your visual skills as well in your CV. Portfolio needs to be accessible. It needs to work. If there is a password, make sure that you mention your password. I need to see it. It needs to represent who you are as a designer. You need to create a strong first impression. And in my LinkedIn, there are plenty of materials about how to do that. It needs to show up to date, basically your understanding of the up to date tools. I mean, there are different tools, but I would be disappointed to go through the PowerPoint slide deck if you're a product designer. There are Figma slides, there is Miro slides, there is Canva, there is Speech. There are plenty more great things if you want to create a slide deck. And it has to have a proper structure. What was the product that you were working on? What was the problem? What was your role? Team? What was the timeline of that role or project or whatever? What was your process? Tell me a little bit about your UXR, but don't tell me about your, I'm not so interested about personas that you've created, but I'm interested, what methodologies have you used? Qual, quant, mix methods. What were the 3 key insights that you came out and why you kept on building what you're building? What was the final solution? How did it look like? And what was the impact out of it? And remember, impact is not just metrics, especially if you work in the agency or consultancy or freelance, whatever, you will never know the metrics, and we all know that. But did you build more efficient processes? Did you build better relationships with your stakeholders? Did you make one customer happy? That's already enough as an impact. LinkedIn has to be similar to your CV. Also, timelines, titles, etc. It has to be exactly the same. You might want to be active actually on LinkedIn, and you might want to be careful or more mindful, more thoughtful. Also, be creative with who you follow in, because depending on who you follow in, that's also the connections that you may be seeing. If you're writing, be mindful what you're writing about. I encourage folks who feel passionate about writing to write. If you don't want to write, you can simply engage with someone else's content and put their comments, and actually the LinkedIn algorithm is allowing you to be very visible just by doing that. And also be mindful what you're saying, right? You want to always convey positive, experienced vibe about yourself. LinkedIn is your chance to make connections that will work for you or against you. So please think about that. All right, we're building. So during this phase, we'll plan and execute solution development in accordance with the requirements. So we're asking ourselves, can people use the solution we're building? In the job search lifecycle, we basically focus on preparing and indirectly applying. So what I mean is that we basically want to ensure that our job search efforts align with our career objectives and aspirations. So we basically looking at particular demands, qualifications, and what we want. So what do they ask, what we want, and we start building towards that. So we want to connect with people like colleagues, past managers, recruiters that we've ever engaged with previously, and ask for feedback on our CV and portfolio. Believe me, if you are reaching out to people who you know, they will never say no. Maybe some of them will never respond, but it's fine. Let's address 10 people and convert 3 feedbacks. How great is that? So you want to share a little bit more as well about the roles that you desire and express that you are a suitable candidate for them. Hey, can you check my CV? Because this is exactly the role that I want. I've done this and that, and I believe that I'm a great candidate. But you're not applying, but you already start fishing, right? You already start creating those leads. You also want to ask if they have any open positions for you, because since you gave such a great presentation about yourself, they may be like, actually, we also hiring, so would you be interested? But don't wait for them to ask yourself. You also want to engage with new network connections, including hiring managers or team members from the discover stage. Remember when we were looking for those interesting roles and interesting people who may be hiring? And so we follow the same approach. Hi, I'm very interested in your product. Would you be open to chat for 15 minutes about your experience? And then as you chat, you can show your portfolio and things like that and say, this is the company I would like to work for. Do you have any open roles? Would you be open to refer me? You want to attend relevant events and workshops and also adjust your assets if the feedback is suggesting that. Because I know that after building your portfolio and your CV, you would think, oh, it's perfect and I don't have to do anything about it. But if the feedback comes in, be critical about this feedback, but be open to it as well. What do we do in SHIP? So we get to see how people integrate in this solution into their habits and workflows. So we want to see whether their needs are still unmet or we're doing a good job. In the job search lifecycle, the game is on. So we start applying. So we want to see basically how the companies are reacting to all the assets that we've built, whether they actually get in, into the contact with us. Do they want to move on? And if not, why? So basically, we want to analyze our successes and failed applications, and we want to try to find the narrative. Okay, I applied for X amount of senior roles, and I've applied for X amount of mid-level roles. I can see that many more mid roles are converting, but senior roles, unfortunately, are not converting. So maybe on the market, I appear more as a mid-level. So can I adjust my application assets to be more senior, or should I be going actually for the mid-level roles? So yes, you should be considering adjusting your application assets and see whether success is higher. You may try to follow up with the feedback request, but be ready not to get it. So if you're coming back to the companies and asking, hey, why did you reject me after the application stage or recruitment screen stage? There's very little chance that you're gonna get the feedback. There's a good chance that you're gonna get the feedback after the hiring manager screen stage. So remember that. Try to reach out to hiring managers or the team members for the roles for which you did not create connections, and let them know that you're interested. If you didn't yet apply, you can still, if you applied, if you didn't apply, you can find those people and say, hey, I saw there is this role. This is my background. This is how this role is connected to my background. This is my portfolio. Will you refer me? Will you talk to me? Hey, I applied. Can you pick up my application actually and talk to me? And please don't apply several times or contact recruiters nonstop, because it will not bring you any more success that you have it from just applying. In maintain stage, we basically want to ensure that existing product quality, UX consistency, load, and performance, so all the important aspects of your product success, they basically all in order. So what we want to do in our maintain stage is that we want to evaluate the outcomes of our efforts, reflect on the feedback that we received, even if we received just a little bit of feedback, and we want to identify the areas of improvement. We want to prepare for each and every interview, and it doesn't matter if you have to introduce yourself 10 times, you have to do it, and every time you need to give that impression that you are excited to do that, because that's how you create this very strong candidate impression. And you want to make sure that you try to foresee as many complications as possible. And the last thing that you want to do is to believe in yourself. So reflect on feedback and come up with ways to present yourself better. Or maybe you want to develop a missing skill, or maybe you want to say how you're going to develop that missing skill. Prepare. So make sure that you have a strong pitch that highlight actual very valuable experiences for you and for the job. So what was the role? What was the product? What was the project? What was the team? What was the impact? Are there any major learnings and fails? This is your pitch, not, hi, I worked there, and I'm excited to apply for this role. No, you have to pitch yourself. You have to create your candidate profile. And in each and every interview, you should give some juicy information so the team wants to dive in. You want to ask before each and every interview to focus, what is the focus? So if the recruiter doesn't tell you that, you want to ask yourself. Ask who will be there and check them on LinkedIn. And if you find something that there's maybe like a similarity, maybe you went to the same school, maybe you follow the same people, maybe you follow the same companies, anything like that, bring it into your interview. It's a halo bias, and that makes people like you more. Be able to adapt to tech issues. Something doesn't work, have a plan B in your mind. Have all the software installed and tested. This is the minimum that you can do to just feel safe and calm. And be ready to speak about your salary expectations, start date, and clear motivations on the very first call. And no, it's not a game. Hey, you tell me the salary band, or I tell you the salary band. Know your worth yourself. Know how much you want and how much is going to make you happy. Okay, this is the last stage. Basically, after we've done all of that, after we've interviewed, and after we've connected with all the employers, we want to see whether we succeeded or pivoted. And very similar in the product development lifecycle, we want to see, is the product serving us or no longer serving us? So if no, we want to deprecate the experience. So when we succeeded, we want to update each and every company and basically say that we're off the market, but we want to keep in touch. Why? Because layoffs are happening, because some people don't perform in the roles, because you never know, right? Maybe they have better role in 6 months and you want to go for it. So you want to keep the connections. If you didn't succeed, you want to start thinking what you can change. Ask for feedback from all processes. Follow up 1, 2, and 3 times, and it's okay. And ask what can be done. If you follow up and just asking, hey, give me feedback, many companies may not give you feedback because they're a little bit worried what you're going to be telling afterwards online about them. So come to them and say, hey, I'm very open to hear feedback on my soft skills, hard skills, presentation skills, design skills, anything like that. Give them that opportunity to give you a very specific feedback and show that you're open to it. Review your CV and portfolio. Any changes needed, then make them and find the mentor to actually get the feedback. Apply to priority 2 roles. Now you have more time. You still have those roles. It's fine. So you need to monitor your process and go for it. Maybe you want to go and scout for more priority 1 roles that are corresponding with your team, with your competencies and skills. You want to reach out to priority 1 roles in 2 to 3 months and see how the things are going. Even if they've hired someone, it doesn't mean there are no more roles or they are performing well. So you want to keep those connections and see what's happening. And you want to stay positive. Cool. So that was it. Thank you so much. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Much, Lena. I think the presentation was great, and I love that you informed everyone on the individual steps how to improve on their portfolio, on their approach with searching about the job. And I think, regardless of the seniority level of anyone who is present today, anyone could have learned something from this. So I think it was a great presentation. And now we can move to the questions that are in the chat. So starting off, we have a little bit of a different question. Have you ever encountered a candidate who won the position because of a background which at the first sight didn't seem important or related to the position? Have you ever encountered someone like this for UX position?
I definitely had experience of interviewing candidates, and either on the first interview or further down the line, as they would speak with the team, we would discover something that we would be like, whoa, we didn't see that happening and coming at all. They like didn't even talk about it, but it's so cool and so relevant. So this is something that I have seen. It doesn't come down to backgrounds. I would say it's more coming down to what skills as an employer I'm looking for. So I need AB skills, and maybe I want you to have an experience of working on very specific projects like security, right? If you haven't worked on security, it's very hard for you to actually start tackling it and like hit the ground running, and as they say. So I would basically try to look for those kind of things. And so sometimes we do come up with those candidates that out of nowhere, apparently they worked on exactly things that we needed. And it does just mean that that candidate didn't do a very good job in kind of identifying what exactly we're looking for. So maybe they looked at the position, they're like, okay, that's exactly me, but they didn't put it in their application assets. They didn't put it in their CV and their portfolio. And yes, by chance I've had it, but I also must be very, very honest that we've had it maybe 1 or 2 times, because most of the time, if we don't see what we're looking for, we reject candidates, and that's how it goes.
Mm-hmm. I think this question was more in a way that whether the CV should include even some details of the background which might not seem as relevant for that specific role because they can be a game changer, or is it in the way that you mentioned that if you are doing this, it's basically that you haven't put enough research in the position and didn't edit the CV enough in this case?
Yeah, well, you see, and this is what I mean. Like, there is no black or white answer to that, right? Like, what is that background? Are you a founder, maybe, and you go into like for startup roles, right? Yeah, maybe it may not seem as the most interesting background, but it actually will make a difference. But do you have a pet project that no one is kind of using, but you think it could be the game changer because you built something? That's a question. So I think that's also the point. Like, I don't want everyone to change their CVs and portfolios for each and every role. And that's why you need to go and properly target the roles that actually fit you, and fit your background and skills. And if you're doing that, there is no surprises like that.
Okay, thank you for that. So let's move on. Should I mention my mental health challenges in an interview or keep them private since the UX design market is competitive and employers prefer experienced candidates?
It's an interesting question because it begins with the mental health challenges, and then it ends with the experienced candidates. So like mental health and experience are not necessarily things that I would kind of treat as the same thing, right? You can have some struggles with mental health because it's overwhelming for many people, but it doesn't mean that you're experienced or unexperienced. So it's going to be different for each and every candidate. I think you need to be strategic here, right? So if you go into the very first interview and you say, I'm actually quite burned out and I really need a job, but I'm super tired all the time, it definitely doesn't make you a very desired candidate, and you may be rejected out of that. What you should be doing, however, is trying to understand what are the working conditions, what is the culture of working, right? Like, do I have to work for like an X amount of hours extra on my time? Are there any mental health benefits, right? Because some companies, for example, give you like the therapy sessions and the coaching sessions and the burnout coach sessions and things like that. And going down the line, you need to test the water. Would I actively suggest to say that? And I'm considering the burnout, right? And it's a big pity that I cannot ask for some clarification to that question. And whoever is asking, you can follow up with me personally, and I'm happy to hear like your case. But if it's a burnout and if it's just like this tiredness and like very demotivated and low spirit, I would not necessarily to bring it into the interview conversations, because I don't think that that's gonna help you. However, you also need to be careful, because if you even were to start the job and go on the burnout leave right away, employer in the first couple of months can still fire you. So you need to be also like, ask yourself a question: am I ready to get into that job? Do I want to take 1 month maybe and just chill and then go into the job search with a much better mental health, if you can afford that as well?
We have many questions, so I'm moving a little quickly through them. So would you say it is a bad thing to have a CV that is more than 2 pages? Or is this something which cannot be answered in general and is case specific?
It can. Hear me out. It can be more than 2 pages, but also for how long you've been working, and like, why can't you describe so let me start like that. If you've been working for 25 years, it's hard to fit it into 2 pages potentially. But also, I'm most interested about your last 10 years of experience. The other 15 years, it's very far away from us, right? So it's not so relevant anymore. So you can really like kind of put the title and just say one thing about it, and that's enough. Because you also need to understand, you don't have to be limited by 1 page, but it also shouldn't be a book, because no one is going to be reading it. Think about human and how much attention span they actually have. If it's more than 3 pages, I will read the first page and that's it. Like, if you don't make a strong impression, you're out. So think about that and try to really, 2 pages is the silver bullet here, I would say, if you need more than one.
Okay. How to communicate my impact if it was a team effort? Should I mention I was a part of a team, or try to specify what exactly was my particular impact?
This is a great question. You should do both. So you should basically describe that I've worked in the cross-functional team, for example, and there were other 2 designers. But then in the case study, I, as an employer, have to see what exactly you delivered, right? Because if you're speaking about just like a big project, it's very hard to understand what is your potential contribution to my company. But it's totally okay that you work with other people, and it's totally okay that it's a team effort.
So a little bit of A and a little bit of B.
Exactly.
Next up, As a UXR, I was asked to include more designs in my portfolio. I'm not a designer, so it wouldn't be my designs. And of course, I was under an NDA, so I don't have a lot or none. Any advice for UXR portfolio?
That's also a good question. I once again wish I could ask a follow-up. I was speaking about designs or visuals, right? Because of course you want to add some visuals into your portfolio, even if you're UXR, to just make it like more flowy and interesting. Do you have to add designs? Of course, you're not a designer. No one expects you to design. And I'm sorry, if you're interviewing with a company that expects you to design, maybe that's not the best company to go for, because they don't understand what user researchers are doing. So maybe you dodge the bullet. What I can recommend, it definitely makes sense sometimes. If you have screenshots of prototypes that you've been testing, that's a great thing that you could add. If you synthesizing some of the insights on the Miro boards or FigJam boards, this is a great visual as well for your portfolio. But also, don't over stress about it. Like, you can also maybe even sketch yourself something right now, and show as if that was something that you were doing back then, if it's corresponding with the truth. Because I'm not going to be testing you on whether or not it's been created 2 years ago or just now. I think it's just good to have some visual representation, because that's how the case study is built. Unless you have some visuals, just very text heavy. So you want to have some elements. But also for UXR, what I've seen working really well is thinking how to work with elements of the presentation. So for example, you have like a black slide, and then you have 3 dots, and it's like inside 1, inside 2, inside 3. That's it. You didn't create anything. You didn't put any picture per se, but you created some interesting visualization effects. So that's something that you can play around. Canva is a great tool for it. Peach is a great tool. Like, all the visual tools are great tools for that. But don't always stress about it either too much.
So basically, the key might be trying to find a way to visualize your experience or your results, even though they are not necessarily visual. In this case, since you are not a designer, you are a UXR.
Exactly.
Okay, so while we are answering these questions, which came throughout the presentation, there were many other questions which came as well. So we will go through as many as possible when it comes to the time that we have left. So, what should I expect from a junior position? My friend burned out after 2 months. Is it just bad luck, or is it really that hard with 14-hour days, 6 days a week? Is it even for everyone? That's a little bit of an extreme case, I would say.
It's an extreme case, and I think it's an excellent question. I love that we're touching on that, because there are two parts to it. First of all, recruitment process is two-way street. So as much as they interview you, you have to interview them. And if you see that that's the environment, then it's up to you. Do you want them to burn you out or not? But there's a second part, and this is something that I've done when I was a junior. I also worked for 3 or 4 first years in my career, 12 hours a day, no holidays. I thought I love it, and then I got burned out. So it's really about your personal boundaries. And if that scares you, what you hear, and if your boundaries starts speaking to you, this is great already. Like, that's your body reaction, and it's a very healthy one. And it's totally okay to create some boundaries. Hey, I cannot work on Saturdays unless you pay me extra, or anything like that. Will you be fired for it? Okay, get a legal insurance and they sue them for doing that, and take the screenshots, right? Like, let's be smart and honest about it. But I think, first of all, interviewing the employer and making sure that they're not hiring you into that black hole. But second of all, if you are in that situation, you still have the rights, and you still can't push back on that, unless you're obsessed about the product and you want to do that yourself. As many, people have different periods in life, and sometimes it's okay, sometimes it's not.
Mm-hmm. I think that is a really, really key factor, that you need to basically feel out the employer during the interview as well, so you know what you are going into, and
Sure.
there is a lower chance that you are surprised with something like this. What skills or qualities do hiring managers typically look for, in your opinion? That's another question.
It's a very open question. I wouldn't still say it's a very good question, because what kind of roles are we talking about? What kind of seniority levels are we talking about? What kind of companies are we talking about, right? Because I used to work in Mira, but if you're looking at a very small startup, it's not going to be the same. So I think a reversed question to you would be, what kind of levels of seniority are you? What are the priority roles that you're applying for? What are those roles are asking for, right? Like, what are they saying? Like, this is what you're going to do. This is what is expected from you. So everything that's said there is basically the qualifications and skills that the company is going to be looking for.
Yeah, I think that's the best answer for this, because it's a little bit of a open question there. Are there any new trends or technology that employers are currently more interested in when hiring designers? For example, AI, VR, AR, specific apps or software, etc.
I mean, I don't have to answer that AI is everywhere, I guess, right? We all know it, and AI is like attached to everything. So yeah, for sure. If you worked with some models and AI, or like AR, VR, and things like that, I think this is great. But it's great only in case if the employer is actually doing that, right? And also, not every product design position or UXR position is going to be focusing on AI, right? Like, they do build the teams to focus on it. I think other cool skills, visual design is very on point, especially if you see if you're junior product designers. There are lots of skills that employers would not necessarily expect from you, like excellent storytelling skills, right? Like, you will have time to develop them, but you do have to bring the craft, and there is no room for not having that craft. At this moment, there's such a high competition. Really level up. So visual design is a great thing. It also wasn't so popular for a couple of years. So there are lots of senior designers who cannot design too well. So if you can, and you're not a senior, that can be your cutting edge. Accessibility is a cool and big thing. So if you're interested, dig in. Prototyping is always a great. Like, if you can create those amazing prototypes, this is awesome. And I think design systems is something that's, like, really out there for a couple of years, and it doesn't get any smaller. But otherwise, I would say this is like the top of mind, something that I see a lot that employers are looking for.
Mm-hmm. I think this is a really interesting question. What is your advice for people who experienced a layoff? How to position it in a resume and interview?
This is a very good question. And honestly, I'm so sad for the market that people who got laid off have to explain it as if they did something wrong and that's why they got laid off. So honestly, first of all, like, don't stress about it. And I think it's very, first of all, in your CV, you shouldn't be telling anything. You just cut, I worked from there to there, that's it. You don't have to specify I got laid off or anything like that. So that's totally normal. In the interviews, yeah, you can just go, and as recruiter asks you to talk about your experiences, you can say that, this is what I've done. And then you can say, in my previous company, that my role was that, I've done that, I've built that, that's the impact that I've drove. And then, unfortunately, because of the restructuring, financial difficulties, the market situation, my position has been eliminated. But then you can also add something like, but I also have been thinking about leaving, if you want to, by the way. It's not necessary. Or you can say, I've been thinking about leaving, or now I'm searching for a new role, and my priorities are ABC. And then I saw your posting and you're looking for XYZ. I've done it in ABC projects, and this is why I'm very excited about that opportunity and the opportunity to talk to you. So don't just say I got fired. Leave it out, like, in general, like, yeah, say like, yes, my position has been eliminated, but then you want to move into how this employer and what they're looking for is corresponding to what you bring, and how it's really playing with your aspirations and what you can bring to the table. And so from that negative question, and I'm sorry if you've been asked about it, move it into very positive and very forward thinking. And this is the best answer that you can give.
Mm-hmm. I think that's the best approach as well. Is it realistic to look for jobs as a junior nowadays without having a degree in UXR?
I mean, honestly, I don't think that, I mean, people from boot camps are getting jobs, right? And they also don't have degrees and they have like 3 months of the boot camp. So yes, it's realistic. Is it going to be hard? It's going to be hard, but it's hard for everyone, whether or not you have a degree. So just stay strong, stay focused, be strategic. And yes, it's definitely worth going for it.
Mhm. I think this one is interesting. My profession is different from what I currently do. I am a licensed publicist, but I currently work more as a UX designer. How can I combine both professions to enhance my resume?
It's a good question. And I think it actually comes down to a lot of career changers, like people who came from marketing into design or from recruitment into user research and things like that. Think about competencies that are similar. So stakeholder management, working with the tight deadlines, working with briefs, and so on and so forth. I'm sorry, I don't know what exactly the licensing role would be about. So I cannot give like a very good example, but I hope I'm making myself clear. So like think about the skills that you've developed in one role that help you be excellent in the other role, and you can really work with that and basically showing that like in one environment I've enhanced it, and then in the second environment I keep on developing that. So that's the best way to really talk about it.
Mhm. And unfortunately, with that, we will be ending today's webinar because the time is running short. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming today. You've been incredible with the questions. There is so many of them, and we are so sorry that we were not able to answer all of them. Maybe next time for round two, possibly. And great thanks to you, Lena. You've been so insightful, and I think that this presentation and the Q&A afterwards was a great experience for anyone who managed to join us today. And thank you again for coming today.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a lot of fun, and thank you for great questions as well. And I really hope that it's going to make a difference in someone else's search and life. So yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you again for joining us today, and have a lovely remainder of your day. Bye.